This week we're going to talk about basic switching concepts and configuration. When you finish this chapter, you should be able to configure initial settings on a Cisco switch, configure switch ports to meet network requirements, configure the management switch virtual interface, describe basic security attacks in a switched environment, describe security best practices in that switched environment, and configure the port security feature to restrict network access. So one of the things you need to keep in mind is that switches are used to connect multiple devices together on the same network. In a properly designed network, our LAN switches are responsible for directing and controlling the data flow. And this is done at the access layer to the networked resources. With our Cisco switches, they are self-configuring and we really don't have to do anything when we take them out of the box. Cisco switches do run the Cisco IOS, and we can manually configure our switches to meet the needs of our particular network. And this includes things such as adjusting the port speed. We can manage the switch if it needs an IP address. We can set up our default gateways. We can shut down ports to enable our security features so that people cannot access through the ports who are currently down. So, and that is one of the port security, is one of the security features of a Cisco managed switch. So we will get into that as well. If you're turning on the switch in our classroom, first you need to make sure that you've connected the power cable to the switch. You'll also connect your console cable so that you can putty in or either directly to the device, or you're going to do the secure shell. And I want to show you exactly what that looks like after the switch has been powered up and it's gone through its boot process. The boot process is the switch loads power on self-test, just like your computer does, and it's stored in ROM. This checks the CPU subsystem. It tests your CPU, your DRAM, and the portion of the flash device that makes up the flash file system. Next, your switch is going to load the bootload software, and the bootloader is a small program stored on ROM and is run immediately after post. Once we've finished that, it performs a low-level CPU initialization. It initializes the CPU registers, which control where your physical memory is mapped. Then it initializes the flash file system on the system board, and finally the bootloader locates and loads the default iOS operating system software image into memory and hands control of the switch over to the iOS. Okay, so let's look at how it looks once we do come up and start. Here is Putty. And this is how it looked when I first turned on the device. It went through the boot sector. Here it is loading everything that it needs to load. And it takes a little while for this to do this, so if you're sitting in the classroom, just give it a second and it will eventually get to where you're wanting to go. Okay. If you are doing this inside of Packet Tracer, you'll just simply click on the switch itself and you will see that the device has also done the same thing. It has gone through the bootloader sector. It has loaded everything that it needs, and again it tells you please return to get started. That means you're just going to hit enter. We can access the bootloader through our console connection with the directory of the flash, and we simply do dir flash : and that is going to access our bootloader. So let's try that, and you'll notice that we have to be at the correct command prompt. So here I'm going to do enable, and then I'm going to do a dir flash : just as it shows me how to do here. Hit enter, and it's going to come up and it's going to show me the information that is stored in Flash. Just as it showed me here, it shows the same thing here. And so that you can see what it looks like inside of Putty. This is how it looks in Putty. On the front of the switch, you will have lights that display that let you know what's going on. You have your system LED, the RPS LED, if RPS is supported on the switch. Next, you have the port status LED, and this is the default mode. Then you have port duplex mode, the port speed, the PoE status, if PoE is supported on the switch, the mode button, that's this one, and then the port LEDs. As this diagram here shows you, you do need to do a few things in order to access your console and your switch so that you can work. You will connect a console cable. In our classroom, it is the blue console cable, and our switches are set up to where that port that you plug into is at the back of the switch when you're sitting facing the PC. Make sure you also connect your power cable. That one's an easy one to forget when you're in the lab. And then you will also connect, if the lab requires it, to a router. Some of the information that you're going to go into and configure on your switch is you'll go into enter global configuration mode. That allows you to configure your device. You can configure your interfaces. You'll give it host names so that you can name your switch. You'll turn that port on with the no shutdown, and then you'll do your copy run start. In this instance here, we've also given it a default gateway. Your default gateway is where it connects to the router. And then I can do show IP interface brief, and it's going to show me the interfaces that are set up on that particular switch. I'll do the show IP INT brief here. You'll notice that everything is down. I haven't configured my switch yet, but you will see that I have VLAN 1. I have fast Ethernet ports 1 through 24, and then I have 2 gigabit ports on this particular switch. When you go in to configure terminal, I can give my host name, and you'll notice that my name changes for my host. At this point, I can set up my interface. I can give it an IP address. Let's see what they gave it as an IP address. Make sure you give it a subnet mask. And we're going to do the no shutdown so that it turns it on. I'm going to back out of this, and I will do the show INT brief again. Just a little trick of the trade, you can use your up and down arrow keys to recall the last couple of commands that you've keyed in so that you don't have to retype them. You'll notice now that my VLAN has an IP address assigned and the status is up. The protocol is down. I don't have anything connected to that VLAN right now, so that is a correct state for it to be in. You need to pay a close attention to the communication for your switches. We have either full duplex communication or half duplex communication. With full duplex communication, we can send and receive simultaneously. That means that we can send data in both directions. With half duplex, we can either send or we can receive, but we cannot do both. The standard shared hub-based Ethernet configuration efficiency is typically rated at 50 to 60% of the stated bandwidth. With full duplex, we're offered 100% efficiency in both directions. This results in a 200% potential use of the stated bandwidth because we're using all of it. With most of our Ethernet and fast Ethernet NICs or network interface cards that are purchased today, they do offer full duplex capability, and our gigabit Ethernets and 10 gigabit network interface require full duplex connections to operate. This full duplex mode is collision detection circuits on your NIC is disabled, and frames that are sent by the two connected devices cannot collide because the devices use two separate circuits in the network cable. So our full duplex connections requires a switch that supports full duplex configuration or a direct connection using an Ethernet cable between the two devices. So you need to keep that in mind. Our switch ports can be manually configured with specific duplex and speed settings. You use the duplex interface configuration mode command to do this, and you'll see these commands here on the right. We would go into config T, we would go to our particular interface, and then we would tell it if we want duplex full. For full duplex, we would tell it its speed, and then we would end out of that. And that is for our full duplex. And on this one, we have 100 megabits. Okay, this is going to give you an example of how to configure this. It tells you here enter configuration mode. This is a good place for you to practice to see how things work. If I'm not mistaken, here on this one, it's going to make you type out the entire command instead of typing in the abbreviation, and it does. So you can test it, practice, you can show me what commands to use, you can show all, but I would suggest that you practice this repeatedly. It's also a good idea as we go through these chapters if you begin to write down the new commands as they're given to you so that you can learn what you're doing. Here is how we set up auto duplex. You can just tell it duplex auto and speed auto. And on this one, we've got what's called auto MDX, and that means that our switch can determine between a crossover and a straight through cable. We don't have to have a particular one being used. It will determine what it needs because it is the MDX. After we have done this, we need to verify some of our setups. These commands here you need to put to memory. You will use them. You will use them quite often. Show interface, and then you actually give the interface name that you're wanting to show. So if I said show interface VLAN 99 and hit enter, it's going to give me the information about that particular interface. I can do show startup, and it's going to show me the startup configuration that is there. I can do show run. It's going to show me the running configuration where I've changed the host name on here and the different things that I have set up. Okay, I can tell it to show flash. I can tell it to show version, and that shows me the version of the iOS that I'm working with. Anytime you see this indicated here, the 2 dashes and more and 2 dashes, you can hit your space bar for it to move up an entire page at a time. I can do show history. Okay, those are the different commands I've keyed in. I can do show IP, INT. Let's go with VLAN 99. Okay, it gives me more information again. I can also tell it to show the MAC address table. Did I do that right? Sometimes it likes for that dash to be in there. Sometimes it does not. And I mean between working in Putty working in Packet Tracer or working in NetLabs, it may work just slightly bit different. So if you key it in and it tells you, like here, it didn't like it, take that dash out and let's see how that works. One of the things you need to keep in mind is you need to be able to troubleshoot your switched media. This is a very good flow chart to perform here. You perform the show interface because that's going to give us the information we need. We'll look and see, is the interface up? If it is, then we have steps to go through from there. If it's not, you need to verify proper cables. You need to check that your cables and connectors aren't damaged. Make sure they're making a good connection. Verify the speed is properly set on both ends. If you got it set right on one end but not the other, it still isn't going to work well or work at all. If that took care of the problem, if it's solved, you're done. If not, document the work done and escalate your issue to someone else if you can't figure